Hey, good morning, and welcome to the first episode of the Mike Murphy podcast. And I'm Mike Murphy. So, people are probably wondering why I'm doing this. I retired from the military with 32 years in the service and retired as a full bird colonel. and I began writing my story, my military story, a number of years ago because I wanted to leave it for my kids and my grandkids once I'm gone. And I was on a podcast down in Madison back in October, and the gentleman that I was doing the podcast with brought up a good point that his podcast, one of the reasons he is doing it, not only sharing his expertise, but he's doing it because he will leave a legacy for his children, his grandchildren, and all of his relatives and family once he's gone forever and ever. And they'll not only have his voice, they'll see his face. So I thought, you know what? Instead of taking the time and typing up my 32 years, I thought I would break my story down into segments and have it for my kids, but then share it with those who may have some interest and want to hear my story. So I'm going to tell you my 32-year story of being in the military and why I went. I was the first and only person in my family to join the military. And I think my story goes way back to high school, as far as defining the path of why I joined the military. I was a senior in high school, and I was not able to play baseball in the spring. I couldn't my freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year because the springtime on a dairy farm is extremely busy. My brother had just purchased his farm, and my help was needed at home. With all the field work and the cattle that we had, I was needed at home to help. So I was not able to enjoy playing baseball, and all my friends would head off and play baseball. And I really, at that time of year, I hated it because I felt like such an outcast. And especially my senior year, I started going down a path that probably wasn't the best. I had a classmate of mine living with us. His name was Kenny, and he had some issues at home. And so he came up probably in the springtime, and I was literally getting ready for school one day, and Kenny was standing at the door, and needless to say, or to make a long story short, he lived with us for about 6 months. So Kenny's a part of this story as far as my senior year and the spring and not being able to play baseball. So Kenny and I, we'd ride to and from school, had a great time at home. He helped us on the farm, and we were probably drinking and goofing around a little bit too much. And I started heading down a path that I was, like I said before, shouldn't have been on. And just having too much fun, enjoying my senior year, having a great time. I was kind of on the downfall with my girlfriend. Things were ending there. And the summer rolled around. I'm still having a great time playing softball for Mr. Eds in Elroy, and started dating Jill, seeing her a few times, and just had a fun summer, a lot of goofing off, like I said, drinking. And then August rolled around, and it was time to head off to college. So I had chosen the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse to begin my career. Had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do, what I wanted to study. Didn't know how to study. As far as college, I made the honor roll in high school, but as we all know, those that went to college, it's completely different. This was the summer of '83, by the way. I was off to college, and I had, I think, about 14 classmates that were also heading off to UW-La Crosse, and so it was a great time. I was rooming with a good friend of mine. We had been on the basketball team together. His name was Bob, and still good friends to this day. And Bob liked to party. I was having a good time. Neither of us studied. My sister and her husband-to-be were living in La Crosse, and had a group of friends that were a year older than me in high school that were also at La Crosse. I think they were attending the Western Wisconsin Technical College, and they were living off campus. And so I was over there a few times. Had another older gentleman that graduated from Royal who also had a home, partied at his house. So needless to say, hitting the books was the last thing that was on my mind. And I'm telling this story because it's going to lead down the road to, again, why I joined the military. So here I am, not studying, not doing well, taking tests, whatever in college, and my grades suck. They're shit. And by probably September, early October, most of my friends had quit school. Bob had left. My sister and her husband moved back to Boston, and they were getting married. The guys that lived off campus that were going to WWTC either quit or were kicked out or went somewhere. They were all gone. And so I was literally in the dorm room by myself, hating college, hating life. Grades were bad. And I went home one weekend, I think it was early October, and told my family I was going to quit school. And they were all for that. I'd be back home, could help them, get a job somewhere locally, and just live in the area. Well, I went back to school, walked down to the tech, because I thought, I got to figure out something. And the only thing that caught my eye was police science, but they weren't offering a course until spring. So I went back to my dorm room, and this was probably the lowest I've ever been in my life. I felt absolutely rock bottom, had no direction, no guidance, didn't know what I wanted to do. Obviously, I had to focus on something. I called home. My sister came up for the day, spent the day with me, and I was supposed to have taken a history test that day, and I missed it, obviously, because I was going to quit school. And after a few hours, my sister had a long talk with me, and she said, "Why don't you stick it out for the semester?" So we went over, spoke to my history teacher. He said my final exam would also incorporate the test that I had missed that day. And what I didn't know is when my sister left, she also actually spoke to the resident assistant of my dorm hall and told him what was going on. And I didn't know this, but he went over and got me a position with the university's television station to work there. So I had some focus. I had some money coming in. It was enjoyable. I met some people. And I was working there and worked there, got a new roommate, finished the year out, did okay. I think I was still on probation. My sophomore year rolled around. Grades got a little bit better, had some focus, but still not where I should be. And I decided to transfer to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire because Jill and I were dating and I wanted to be closer to her. And something clicked when I transferred. I started studying. I made the dean's list. I was still in communications and broadcast journalism as my major. And things were going well. For the next 2.5 years, I was enjoying what I was doing, had some focus. And December of '87 rolls around, graduation. And I graduated, and I can literally remember standing in Zorn Arena thinking to myself, what now? Because I hated my major. I had a professor that really pushed hard the last semester, probably last 1.5 years that I was at Eau Claire. And I was not prepared to go out into the real world to find a radio broadcasting position or a television position, and I didn't want to do that. Like I said, I hated my major. So I can remember standing in Zorn Arena, graduation day, thinking, what do I do now? What now? Well, obviously went home. My brother, Jill's brother-in-law at the time, my best friend, was getting ready to head to flight school at Fort Rucker and to fly Blackhawks. And obviously we must have had a conversation. I don't remember that conversation, but he drove me to Madison. And I decided I was going to join the Air Force. And so we stopped and spoke to the recruiters at the Air Force recruiting station. And I think I had the idea, some wild idea of flying A-10s when the Air Force still had them. And the recruiter told me, come back in 6 months. They must have had their quota filled or whatever. And so I knew that wouldn't work. I knew I needed to do something. So we literally went across the street or next door, wherever it was located, and saw the Army recruiter. And his name was either Staff Sergeant or Sergeant First Class Jim Collins. And spoke with him, and he signed me up. And so I officially joined the military on 22 December 1987. And I had absolutely no clue about the military. I didn't know what would happen. I had no clue about basic training. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew is that I signed up and that I was going to be leaving shortly. So I think it was soon after I received my orders in the mail. I belonged to the 147th Aviation out of Madison, and didn't even know what they did. I knew they had helicopters and that I belonged to them. I was signed up to be a 67 Victor. Again, no idea what that meant, but found out later it was a scout helicopter repair/crew, and but I'll get to that down the road. And I also read on the orders that I would be going to Fort Bliss, Texas. Had no clue where Fort Bliss was. Found out it's located in El Paso. And so I had the orders in hand, and I also recall my recruiter asking me, Mike, do you want to leave before the holidays or after? Well, that's a no-brainer. I told him afterwards, and so that's what we did. I enjoyed the holidays, told family and friends that I was leaving, got through that, and I can remember the day that Jill took me down to Milwaukee to the MEP station. And we had been told that she could go and spend the evening with me. Well, I found out when we got down there that there were 3 other guys that had been recruited that were going to be in the same room as me. And so that didn't work. So we got our own room. We went out for supper, had a nice supper, and went to bed. And I slept really well that night, and got up the next morning. I can remember getting my stuff together, packing my bags, hopping in the car, still feeling good. And we literally were 2-3 blocks from the MEP station. And when we turned the corner, Jill was driving. She had a boat of a car back then, huge car. And I can remember when she turned the corner, I still get a sick feeling in my stomach even talking about this 30-some years later. I saw the big blue square MEPS building, and it seemed like a ton of bricks literally fell, not literally, but it seemed like a ton of bricks fell on my shoulders. And I just felt crushed, and I felt anxious and nervous, and it's like, what the hell? And Jill drove up to the side of the building. There was no place to park. There were cars behind us, and so I had to give her a quick kiss and hug and say goodbye. And I can to this day remember getting out of the car, walking across the street and seeing the tail end of her car turn the corner, and she was gone. And I can tell you, I have never felt more alone in my life. And she left. I went inside. I can remember, there was a drill sergeant in there and some other people. We had to do some medical stuff, and but I sat pretty much the whole day. I think we saw the recruiter or the drill sergeant individually, and he would yell at us and ask if we had not disclosed anything. But I can remember sitting in the MEPS area all day. I was able to get permission to call Jill. I think it was around 11:30, and I just wanted to make sure she was home, which she was, which made me feel a lot better. And again, sat there all day, not really doing a whole lot, probably a couple of medical checks, maybe some paperwork, whatever, and not being told a thing. And then late in the afternoon, the staff came in and they had our airline tickets. They must have been working on those all day. And I can remember myself and another young man from the Milwaukee area running to a vehicle, and the MEPS worker, station, personnel, whoever took us to the airport was driving like a bat out of hell, so we could make our flight. And we got to the airport, barely made our flight, and I can remember myself and the young man from Milwaukee, the other guy that was going to Fort Bliss, sitting in the last 2 seats of the aircraft. And I can remember the acrid smell of cigarette smoke, because back in 87, 88, you could still smoke on airplanes. And so there were people up front smoking, and so you'd get the filtered air in the back, and it just absolutely stunk. And that was my first flight. So we landed, we flew to Dallas, Texas for a layover. And we got there, and we probably had 3 or 4 hours in between our flights. And I can remember the other young man, I don't recall his name, but he went to the desk and said, "Hey, we can get on an earlier flight." and get to Fort Bliss earlier. And I can remember telling him, nah, these are our last few hours of freedom. Let's enjoy it. Big mistake. We should have went earlier. We landed about midnight in El Paso. I can still remember the plane banking and seeing the city lights. And we landed. There were personnel there from Fort Bliss that gathered us up, loaded us into a van, and we drove to the barracks. And I can remember going in, standing with the drill sergeant. There was probably a half a dozen new recruits in there. And I can remember being yelled at because I had a mustache. And the drill sergeant told me that he would not see that in the morning. So I must have shaved, obviously, that night, and I got to bed sometime after 1 o'clock, and I just laid down and found a bunk first, and because you could hear guys snoring. There were guys there for, obviously, days before I got there, and found a bunk, laid down, and we were up at 4 o'clock, and again, I can still vividly feel, smell, see, hear, and just all the feelings that I felt of being at Fort Bliss and at Reception Station. And it was not good. But here I am, 32 years later. I wanted to give you the first episode, basically, of how I got there. I think it all started way back in high school, not having direction, going down the wrong path, not finding direction through college. After going to college, still not really knowing what I wanted to do. And so making that decision, having my best friend at the time in the military, and then making the decision to join. But I will tell you this, after 32 years in the military, and all the things that I did, the places I went, the wonderful people I met, being in combat in Iraq, leading troops there, working at the Pentagon, working at Joint Special Operations Command and in Stuttgart, it opened up a world to me. And the military, the United States Army, really took care of my family when I look back at everything that I did, the money I made, the places I got to travel to, and how I am today. The type of person I am today. So this first episode, I wanted to basically share with you how I got to this point, the what now after graduation from college and not having any direction. And by the grace of God, I was given direction, joined the military, and off I went. And so I was with the Wisconsin Army National Guard. I belonged to the 147th Aviation. I went to Fort Bliss, Texas for basic training, and in the next episode, we will get into what basic training was all about. And you're going to love a couple of my stories. I'm going to tell you about Tiger Call, getting mail, and I'm going to tell you about volunteering. One of the first days with the drill sergeants, which, everyone's told never volunteer. I stood up and made an ass out of myself. I'm going to tell you about a typical day and a little bit of sleep that we got. I'm going to tell you about the time we spent in White Sands in New Mexico for 2 weeks for weapons training and grenade training. And we'll get into some of the stories. I've got some guys and I've got some pictures that I'll share for those that would watch this on YouTube or Spotify. I will share some pictures of some of the soldiers. I still have all their names. I think I've got pictures of all of them and some great stories. And so we'll get into that in the next episode. So here we are. I am now joined. I'm at Fort Bliss, Texas. And the next step is waking up day one of basic training. Thanks for listening.